morning. Welcome to Lakeside Labs Facebook Friday Live. And today we're with Jane Lieb, who's going to give us an interesting history and tour of her experience landscaping her lawn in a lake-friendly way. And you can see it behind us. And she's going to tell us the story of what the property looked like before she moved here, the challenges that she had, and we're just going to explore the wonderful prairie garden that she has, and the role that we can all play in managing our lawns, especially our lakefront property, for water quality and wildlife diversity. So Jane, thanks for talking to us today. And you can take your mask off, we will be able to hear you better, and I'll be sure that I socially distance. So why don't we start off, give us a little, lead us to your property. So.
Well, we bought this piece of property, an empty lot, 23 years ago. And my husband is a retired architect, so he designed our house, and the two of us built it over 3 years. Because we did most of the work ourselves. And first thing we did after buying the property was to put in the steps down to the shore. We didn't want just straight steps. We wanted something that was more.
You have an unusually steep bank.
Very steep bank. I think there must be 40 or 38 steps to get up to the deck from here. So it's steep, and in some places it's really steep. You can't stand on it. You just slide down the hill. So when we bought it, there was a ravine over here on to the left-hand side of the property that was just a bare gully. And when the property next door was purchased, they needed to fill in that ravine. So we put some fill dirt in. They had the major part of the ravine to fill, but
so you had to fill the ravine with soil?
So we had to fill the ravine with soil, and then you have all this soil there, so you have to put something down.
You have to stabilize it.
Stabilize it. So at that time, the best thing for stabilizing soil was the roadside mix, which was crown vetch, bird's foot trefoil, and I don't remember what the other things
were. So those are species of plants that the the Department of Transportation used.
Yes, right. Yes, that was routine.
And what did you learn about that seed mix?
Well, eventually I learned that was probably the worst thing I could have done. But we planted various bare root trees and shrubs and things that we got from the DNR, and then they started having the low impact development classes in the area.
So
and
the
I
low
went to
impact
all
development,
of those.
was through our Water Quality Commission. They had a series of educational workshops.
Yes. And so I really jumped into that and
so that's
learning all of that about taking care of the water running off the property.
That's wonderful that you are able as a homeowner to attend those workshops and learn that. So what was the first thing you learned about that original seed mix? What kind of species were those? Were they native or non-native?
They were mostly non-native, I guess.
So there were non-native species, and then through the low impact development workshop you learned about the native
things that are so much better.
And so can you talk a little bit about why native species are better?
Well, somewhere along the line I found a book on my dad's bookshelf that was published in 1968, and it was prairie plants and their environment, and it was a culmination of 50 years of plant ecologists studying native plants, prairies in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Minnesota.
Is that Weaver?
Weaver, yes.
Wonderful, what a treasure to find.
I love that book. I read every single word of it. And I called my brother the other day to ask him the name of the book, and it was still sitting in the same spot on the shelf as when I found it 20 years ago.
Well, that's a classic
that's
prairie ecology.
Okay, well, it intrigued me so much that all of these native plants have various different kinds of deep root systems.
Deep root systems.
So the butterfly milkweed, I think it is, has a really long taproot. Am I right on that? And the prairie dropseed has this most marvelous fountain-like plant,
Mhm.
and the leaves go up and they come down, and it's so dense that they prevent other plants from growing underneath it.
Mhm.
But that's okay because the root system of that plant
Mhm.
is massive
Uh-huh.
and deep from the very top of the soil down, and so nothing's going to run off
Uh-huh.
from
So those
because
plants
that's
are going
the soil.
to anchor your soil.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And I don't remember the details of any of the others.
Yeah. Well,
But
could you, shall we
um,
stroll up there and get a close-up look, or do you,
let's see.
you can see?
I'm trying to remember what the let's stroll up there and not
Okay.
think of it.
Okay, let's get a close-up. Wow, this is wonderful. You can see the jewelry right here along the shore. And earlier we saw, I see a bumblebee in there, and then earlier we saw hummingbirds moving through here. Okay.
All right. Well, as I started planting things, and I met the people at Prairie Flower, and that was the most wonderful garden you could ever have, is to go to Prairie Flower.
Yeah, Dwight and Bev
and-
Rudder down in Fostoria.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So every year I'd go a couple times a year and buy a few plants and put them in somewhere on the hillside, and
Uh-huh.
then after a few years back, my knee was bad, and I just really couldn't walk around on the hillside anymore and inspect all the things, and so I didn't do anything on the hillside for a year or so. Let's see, but before that, oh yes, and in surveying what I had, I discovered that there were an awful lot of invasive species on the property. The really beautiful, kind of ornamental looking trees were buckthorn, and we do not want buckthorn. I started pulling out buckthorn seedlings
Because they will
everywhere.
like shade the earth
Yes.
layer, so
and
plants
they
can't
just
grow.
they you know, there are just so many of them, and
So this was actually kind of shrub covered.
a fair amount of it. If it wasn't buckthorn, it was the bad kind of honeysuckle that spreads everywhere, and there was burdock, and I can't remember what the other things were, but so I was here trying to pull out a plant at a time and trying to replant something a plant at a time, and then after when I was able to get back on the hill again, I realized that well, there were lots of wild roses and
Wild roses?
wild, I think they were black raspberries, I'm not positive, but they were very tiny berries and you didn't want to eat them. And they had really covered a whole lot of the area. They had spread tremendously. And especially over here in the area where we had put in the fill dirt, in that time that I was not on the hillside, it became
Probably impenetrable thicket.
it was, I'm trying to think of the word from, what did Brer Rabbit, wasn't going to go into, the briar patch.
The briar
It was
patch.
a briar patch.
Jane Briar Patch.
And I realized that even though we planted all of these things, underneath that briar patch, it was just bare dirt.
Bare dirt,
Not
yeah. So it's
even
kind of
the crown.
deceiving, you know. People see, green, but and as they look down to see what's underneath, it could be bare.
Yes. So even the crown vetch was not growing underneath that briar patch. I decided it was, I needed to do something drastic. This one plant at a time wasn't working. And it was about that time that I heard about a grant that you could get from the Clean Water Alliance, or Soil and Water Conservation District had a grant program for doing a hillside stabilization project. And I decided this was the time to do that. if ever.
So this would be
And
how
so-
many years after you got started originally?
Well, it would have been 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
5 years
5
ago.
years ago. So
So-
you've been working
so-
for 5 years already.
Yeah, the
Trying
first
different
year I'd been, It's been 5 years since we did the
Yeah.
project.
But you
Before
spent
that-
like about 5 years just trying different things before you discovered
Oh,
that
I've
program.
been doing that for 20,
Yeah, okay.
18 years. A plant at a time, and that didn't work. So
On this property.
on this property,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
And let's see. So it took a while to get everything orchestrated to do the seeding, and then 4 years ago, this coming November, we hydro-seeded the whole hillside. But it took a couple of months of work to get all of the vegetation cut off, and I hired Kim Oakland.
Okay, so you actually had to hire somebody to
Hired
get all the woody stuff out
Yes,
and brush?
they came in and did an
Uh-huh.
excellent job of getting everything out and hauling it away.
Yeah. So,
And-
did you have to herbicide it all or treat the woody vegetation?
I treated every little woody vegetation I could
By
find.
hand?
By hand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And you did it
And-
or did they help?
I did that.
Wow,
Yeah.
you are really meticulous. That's a lot of
Well,
work.
yeah, and things that I knew that they hadn't gotten, like woodbine had
Uh-huh.
vines that had grown from the
Yeah.
east side of the property all the way across the steps. I mean, they were, and so
Sometimes
I
known as
went
Virginia
along
creeper,
and
yeah.
pulling it out and treating every root node. So yes, I was meticulous,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not get everything. But I
you
got
never do.
an awful lot of. And so we hydro-seeded it.
So can you
in
explain,
November.
people might not know what hydro-seeding is?
Well, it was the hillside was just bare dirt. There was a little,
Can you imagine?
little bit of brown stuff here and there, but and it made me nervous between the time of getting it cleared off until we were able to hydro-seed it, because you had to wait till it was the last frost or first real frost freeze, I think it was,
Before you hydro-seed?
before you hydro-seed. And or you did it just before. But then they came in with this huge hose and they draped it down the property line and all along here.
A big hose, like about this wide? Or?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, maybe I've forgotten. But then they started spraying this blue-green mush all over the hillside and covered everying down to about this line.
So tell us more about that mush. The seeds, are they embedded in the
The
mush?
seeds were in the mush, and I had talked with Ben Rudder about what seed mix should be in it, because there was something that I didn't want. I didn't want big blue stem because I knew that would be way too tall.
Yeah, you wanted more short grasses so you have the view.
Right. Yeah. And
So
then
this
we
mushy
waited for
stuff, can you explain why the mush?
it holds the soil.
Uh-huh.
It holds the plants, the seeds in the soil,
Uh-huh.
and it can wait till spring for the seeds to.
So
the
it kind
seeds
of
aren't
makes a
going to
nice
wash out in
blanket,
the
it
rain.
sticks to the ground, especially on a steep slope, it'll hold
Yeah,
it.
it's sticky stuff, because it ended up on the neighbor's stone wall, and I had to
Wash
kind
it
of
off.
brush it off, or clean it off. And then we waited for things to grow, and one of the stipulations of the grant was I had to mow 3 times each season for the first 3 years, and mow it down to 6 inches, and that. Sorry about that. It's so steep that was difficult to do.
Yeah, I was wondering, how
I
did
used
you mow?
a weed whip.
Wow.
And so I'd stand here and hold it up there, and then I'd, it's so steep that a lot of times I got my rusty knife. I've forgotten now what this is called, but I have 2 of them because they're so essential to.
Is this a special gardening tool?
Yeah.
Well, this is neat.
Made in
It's got
Japan.
inches.
This was really sharp to begin with, but it's gotten.
You dulled it.
And yeah, it has measurements. And so if you want to dig out a deep root, you jam this in and cut around and.
So you actually hand cut and weed whack this bank 3 times?
Well, I didn't use this for cutting. I used this
Oh, this
for jamming into the soil, and then I had my foot against it. I may not have it in deep enough.
Uh-huh.
But what kept me standing on the hillside.
Wow.
And a lot of this steepest part.
That's amazing. So you use that to stabilize yourself.
Right.
Here I thought you were using it to
Well,
trim grasses.
I have certainly used it an awful lot for.
You could make a harness. Hook to your
Well,
house.
I was
Wow, that
worried
is
I'd
a real
strangle
labor
myself
of
doing
love.
that. So,
Wow.
well, yes, I guess you could say I'm a bit obsessive about it, but it feeds my soul. So,
Feeds your soul.
Yes.
Yeah, prairie roots
Yeah.
go deep into the soil.
so after 3 years, this is the first year that we have not mowed it at all,
Uh-huh.
and I'm dumbfounded at how many things there are that I did not see in the first 3 years.
Isn't that wonderful? Like
And-
surprises.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cytosgrama everywhere, which is really encouraging to me. I still haven't identified a lot of things, and I think because of the
Here's some
mowing.
side oats.
Yes, there's cytos right there.
And there's a whole lot of forbs or flowering plants. So it's kind of not as brilliant right now as it might have been a few weeks
No,
ago.
a few weeks ago there were a lot of really bright yellows, and
And you were telling me earlier about all the butterflies
oh yes, I've never seen so many butterflies
of
as
all
we
different
did.
kinds.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes, and when you hear some people's stories of a roost of monarch butterflies, we didn't have a roost, but I had more flying around in the course of the day than I had seen and
That's wonderful.
had ever seen. So, and birds love it. There was one plant I wasn't sure what it was. I was pretty certain it was a weed, and now I don't remember where it is. I thought I would ask these experts, but now I can't find it. So, but there were 3 of them standing side by side, and I would have pulled it in ordinary times, I guess, but I didn't. And then there were some goldfinches sitting on it, eating it. So I said, okay, that's not a weed. They're enjoying it.
So the animals and the birds and the butterflies are teaching you also
Yes.
what plants to keep and
Yes, I guess so. Yes.
yes.
So I love it. I
Yeah,
treasure every plant. And
this is terrific. You don't see any bare soil here.
the only place you're going to see any bare soil is over here where I started the crown vetch, which wasn't there underneath that briar patch, has filled in a huge area, and it gets so much vegetation from this little stalk plant that's over there, and it just covers a huge area and really smothers out an awful lot of things. And so I have very carefully gone through and pulled out the vegetation that was on top, and just in the last month, not all of it, but just in an area, and being careful to see what native things are there any native things underneath it. In some places there were things that were struggling. It had even covered up some milkweed plants that I thought, wow, how did it do that? Because they're pretty tenacious things. But
So are you going to consider one way people manage prairies is through fire?
yes,
Are you thinking about doing that, or is that allowed?
I am thinking about that, but I have to call the insurance agent still,
Okay.
and I keep forgetting to do that. But I thought, well, we could just do one side of it and have a time.
So one thing that a lot of people don't think of when they plant prairies, they don't realize how long it takes to establish. 'Cause
Right.
the first year, what did it look like?
There were plants, but nothing got very tall because they kept cutting them down. I guess I had planted a lot of plants, native things along the steps, so I didn't mow those down, and so that gave me something to look at for the first 3 years.
So like planting a prairie is kind of like planting a tree. You don't expect the tree to grow up overnight.
No,
But with the prairie, you know, what's happening? Do you know why it takes so long for it to establish?
because it's growing roots.
Right. So those
It's
roots are kind of like the upside down tree.
Right.
They're getting established. Yeah.
And with the weed whip, it was hard to maintain a cutting height of 6 inches, so I may very well have ruined the chances of some of the native things because I just couldn't control it that well. So in places where we don't have as many natives, I'm blaming that the cause.
Oh, this is just amazing. It really looks like you can see all kinds of textures, and there's grasses and forbs, the flowering plants all mixed in here. So what advice would you give other people? Because it looks like you went through a really long process of trying different things before you settled on this.
Yes.
And what advice would you give other homeowners? Patience?
Patience, yes. And
Fred Weaver?
Yes.
You recommend his book on
yes,
prairies?
Yes. Weaver is definitely a good book. I have several other books that are modern books, and that's one that I read just recently that said that crown vetch they had it near the top of the list of the really invasive things that you don't want. And so that.
And then locally, you mentioned the Clean Water Alliance or the
Yes,
Soil and Water Conservation Service.
Yes, John Wills got everything going, and I felt comfortable doing it when I had this list of instructions. This is how you do it. Although I'm not sure I would follow the directions exactly another time around. But
because you
I
learned
guess
about the nuance of each
yes,
situation.
and oh shoot, the thought just went by of what it was that.
Well, you had a list of instructions.
What surprised me was the number of plants, especially grasses, that were coming up from the latent seed, or the dormant seed that had just been lying there. Because there's a lot of fescues and some of the plants, the grasses that I'd planted up on the flat part up there are seeds from that migrated down the hillside quite a bit.
So they weren't in the original mix.
They were not in the original mix. So
I can see some brome grass in here.
Yeah, at one time I was sure there was only a little bit of brome grass down here, and now it's all over.
But it's a cool
I
season.
know that I have canary weed grass. Oh, this is the other thing I need to tell you
Show
about.
us some of your favorite plants.
Oh, okay. This is our wetlands area.
Oh,
and,
yeah?
And John Wills, because it was just a little puddle there, and he brought some
Oh yeah, I can tell you.
wetland plant or seed mix that
Uh-huh.
he'd gotten from, and he scattered them around in there one day. So there are reeds and rushes and things in there, but there's also some canary wheatgrass, which is another really bad one.
Yeah, got to keep your eye on that one.
Yeah. So okay, so some of my favorite plants. Well, black-eyed Susans are fun
This
everywhere.
time of year, yeah.
And
This is a
there are so many of these yellow.
looks like oxeye daisy.
Could be.
Has like the broader leaf and sandpapery leaves.
And I just call these, my sister told me these are, I said, well, what is this? And she said, it's a DYC, a darn yellow composite. And I decided, okay, that's
like
all I need to know.
The LBB, the little brown bird.
Yeah. So I just found out this morning from these young men that this is a snake root. And
snake
this
root.
is a butterfly milkweed.
Yep, it's doesn't look like it's developing pods, but
No,
not all seeds, not all flowers end up getting fertilized and developing into pods.
no. Asters. This is an aster. Now this looks like it's going to maybe a
Yeah, these are
darker-
going to bloom soon. This will be
Yeah.
the smooth-leafed aster. I think it's
Smooth
got
leaf?
a nice blue flower.
Okay.
I love the asters. There's
It's
so
a-
many different kinds.
So we're just kind of in between the asters and all these yellow things that have been blooming for a long time. There is, here's
milkweed. This one's going to seed. It's got some aphids on it.
Now this is one that we haven't.
This is the mystery plant. We're going to figure this one out.
Yeah, we have to figure that
But
one
it is
out.
a legume.
And I see it's in 3 or 4 different places, so we're not sure that it's native. But
Oh, and look at this beautiful grass.
and this is a little blue stem, which I didn't know was there until I saw it starting to bloom
Oh, isn't that nice?
a little bit ago. And so yes, I love it.
I think it's more like little purple stem.
Yeah, I don't know what these are or that one.
That's
I'll have
another
to-
fun thing about it is just all the surprises and challenges you have. You know, you don't just look at a plant once and know what it is.
Now this is this looks like one of the asters that was native on the hillside when we got the property.
And that one, I'm not exactly sure which species, but it has the center is often sometimes purple and yellow on the same flower. Yeah. Oh, and there's more up there blooming.
Okay, yeah, there's one here. This is a, I tried to plant, I put extra blue grama in here because I knew I wanted something short, and I think the Sidos grama has kind of
Decided that it
covered
was
up,
its
covered
space.
it up. But now I'm trying to find there is a little, there's a blue grama here somewhere.
What's this lush grass?
Oh, this is
This
the
is
prairie.
so wonderful.
This is the prairie dropsy. that
Oh
I
yeah,
mentioned.
look at that.
It just has this wonderful
Isn't that
fountain.
beautiful?
And the flowers aren't very conspicuous, but because they're so fine.
Oh yes, they're beautiful. They're
Beautiful.
quite delicate. Yeah.
Very delicate. And when I may have about a dozen
Oh, these are
of
beautiful.
them that I
Yeah.
planted here. And
There's really beautiful patterns there of all the different grasses, the side oats, and the little blue, and the dropsy.
Yeah. So this is where I found it. So there's bare soil there, but that's not going to erode anymore because there's such a root system underneath it.
And the long leaves kind of help stop runoff, kind of slow it down.
Let's see, what else?
We have some Canada wild rye showing off
Canada
there.
wild rye, yes. And there's some of that scattered around. And, the first 3 years when you keep cutting these things down, you didn't see where those were. So.
Oh, we have a question
Oh.
from Cheryl Paul. She says, what kind of plant seeds are used when hydroseeding?
We got a mix of seeds from prairie flower.
They made the
Australia.
recommended, yeah.
They recommended the mix, and I think maybe the NRCS had a
Yeah, they have a recommended.
recommendation.
But you knew that you wanted to have shorter grasses, so you kind of helped tailor that mix. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for your question, Cheryl.
Yes.
Well, we're a little bit running into our end of our time, so would you like to close with one more favorite plant you would like to show us?
Let's see.
How about right behind you?
Coneflowers. There are
Yeah.
lots of kinds of coneflowers. This one actually may be one that I bought somewhere else and planted here. It may not be a local native, but
And here it is, what it looks like after it goes to seed.
yes, and
And there with the flowers.
they're I love harvesting seeds. So I'm waiting for these to dry out a little bit more before.
And
it's
when you
time to
harvest your
them.
seeds, what do you do with them?
I put them in a legal size envelope and seal it, and then try to remember to go out and plant them.
Do you stratify
scatter
them? Do you
them.
put them in the freezer in the wintertime to
Well,
stratify them?
What I've usually done is put them on in the fall.
In the fall?
And put burlap over them.
Oh, okay.
I had an area over here where the ground is, after getting rid of some bad things, the ground is bare, so I did that last fall. I will probably be doing that too.
And I love your sculptures here too.
Those are my husband's.
And
These
they
are
look like
his
they're enjoying the garden
shorebirds.
too.
Yes,
Yeah, they look
do.
like shorebirds, or like upland sandpipers.
Upland sand. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
that's
have
the
to tell him.
species, one of the sandpipers in the prairie.
Oh, I hadn't noticed this. Maybe that's the partridge pea. You suppose?
Oh, I think it might be a Astragalus.
Straggles.
Yeah.
Oh.
Does it have a white flower or a yellow,
I don't know.
creamy
I
yellow one?
remember.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
did, come to think of it.
Almost looks like milk fat.
Yeah, milk vetch. Isn't Astragalus
Oh.
the native name? I don't know. Or the
Oh, no,
scientific
okay,
name.
so that's milk
Uh-huh.
vetch.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I know that was supposed to be in the mix. That's why I thought, well, I don't know. Okay.
Well,
I
I
told you
guess
about everything I can
yeah,
remember.
well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, and I'm amazed at how hard you've worked, but it's really paid off.
I'm quite pleased with it. We have birds all winter long feeding on
all the seeds.
lot of the seeds.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Probably all kinds of sparrows and juncos.
Yes. It's always a pleasure to look out here in the winter and as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.